happens when the family scapegoat leaves their toxic family with no plans to return, ever? That's what I'm covering today. Let's do it. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Tamie M. Joyce. I'm the founder of Tamie M Coaching and the creator of the Freedom Class and the Ascension Class. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a coaching client, there's a link in the description below this video where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team. So let's talk about what happens when the family scapegoat leaves their toxic family of origin with zero intent to ever return. And in case you're unclear as to what I mean by the term family scapegoat, the term refers to a very real experience within a dysfunctional family system and a specific kind of narcissistic abuse involving the singling out and targeting of one specific member of the family, often the most vulnerable and highly empathic. And the abuse includes, but is not limited to, harsh criticism, shaming, blame shifting, as well as transferring onto the family scapegoat unresolved issues such as pain, hostility, shame, fear, guilt, anger, and aggression. And these issues, by the way, more often than not, have little, if anything at all, to do with the person being scapegoated in the sick family system. In a narcissistic family, the family routinely blames the scapegoat for their problems as a means of deflecting attention away from the real issues and conflicts that desperately need to be addressed but continue to go unacknowledged, while the narcissistic family members find relief by shifting blame and shame onto their chosen target, the family scapegoat. And as such, the scapegoat is chronically criticized, shamed, mocked, ridiculed, and punished, even for the shortcomings and mistakes of their abusers, as well as the very real relationship crimes that are being committed by other narcissistic family members. And as a result, the abuse that the scapegoat endures often leaves them with serious mental and emotional challenges that they can carry throughout their lives, until they become ready to embark on a serious healing and recovery journey, and therefore start to take much better care of themselves and reclaim their power. Naturally, this often begins with putting some distance between themselves and the perpetrators. And this, of course, raises the question, what would happen if the scapegoat were to permanently break free and cut ties with their abusive family of origin? Well, in my view and experience, both personally and professionally, when a scapegoat walks away from their abusive family, no matter how passive and covert or not so covert the abuse may have been, the first thing that is likely to happen is that some members of the family are going to try to manipulate or possibly even coerce the scapegoat back into the family fold. And they'll do this because every dysfunctional family needs a scapegoat. In other words, a target, a dumping ground, a literal repository for their own negative emotions, unresolved issues, and disowned shadow. So naturally, when a scapegoat leaves their family of origin, they're going to experience a lot of gaslighting, manipulation, blaming, and shaming, as well as invalidation, often from so-called well-meaning enablers, the narcissist's meddling little entourage, sent to send very specific messages with very specific intent. I remember the first time I opted out of a family function. It was on the heels of having been deliberately left out of, quite literally uninvited to, a major family event, my grandmother's 85th birthday party. And when I chose not to participate the following Easter, the ringleader and one of my primary abusers when I was a child had some questions. In fact, as I understand it, everyone was shocked and surprised. So I received a very scolding phone call from the ringleader, my aunt, who was an absolute bully, whose nose was all out of joint because I hadn't addressed the issue with her directly. Simply opting out and frankly protecting myself, well, that wouldn't do. It was fine for them to abandon me entirely and at will, and quite publicly, I might add, in terms of my entire extended family. But when I chose to remove myself of my own free will, well, that was not okay. If you identify as the family scapegoat, what you must understand is this: they don't want you to leave, not permanently. Without you, they have no one to blame, shame, and transfer all of their own stuff onto. So when you begin to put some distance between you and your toxic family, they may very well come knocking, but not out of any real sense of care, concern, or remorse for that matter. Rather, it will be an onslaught of gaslighting, manipulation, bullying, and more blame shifting. And perhaps just enough breadcrumbing thrown in to win you over. All of which is specifically designed to hoover you back into the abuse cycle so that you remain the primary dumping ground for all of the family's negative emotions, unresolved issues and trauma, and toxic attitudes and behavior. So it goes without saying that a scapegoat in the process of breaking free from their sick family system is inevitably going to experience a ton of confusion and negative emotion when making the decision to leave the dysfunctional family dynamic permanently. After all, this is your family that we're talking about, right? And if you're highly empathic, chances are good you really love these people, like really love them. In spite of the abuse, you love them far more than they've ever loved you. So it's a painful process without question. And this is particularly true when you don't have a really strong and clear support system around you. People who actually get it and know the game being played. People who can help you navigate your way out of the nonsense and the insanity of it all. So don't beat yourself up if you find that you're struggling with guilt, shame, fear, or intense feelings of loneliness, in addition to having subconscious abandonment issues triggered by virtue of even contemplating making the decision to cut the cord. This is big stuff, and not for the faint of heart. And it requires a solid, healthy support system around you in order to be able to navigate the process in a way that is productive, safe, and healthy for you. Don't worry about them. They'll be just fine. Now here's the thing. Facing down the prospect of going it alone in the world, disconnected from any kind of real family unit, the very people who have known you your entire life, the people who are supposed to be your tribe, this is no small thing. No matter how painful and destructive belonging to that tribe has been for the scapegoat, needless to say, the prospect of cutting the cord permanently can be terrifying, even for the strongest of us. Why? Well, because it triggers our deepest survival instincts, and again, all of our abandonment issues. And for many of us, it also involves doing the deep soul work of healing the orphan archetype. And believe me, if you've been cast as the family scapegoat, you have indeed been orphaned. Even if not physically, literally, you have been abandoned in every other way. So it goes without saying that our wounded inner child is highly activated and all of our worst fears are fully triggered. And what adds insult to injury here is the knowing that not only can these people not look at themselves and acknowledge the real damage they've caused in any real or honest way, they can never be wrong. But moreover, they're not going to change. After decades of treating you poorly, which for many of us is putting it mildly, it's clear that they aren't magically going to morph into decent, kind, loving people with empathy and compassion, not where you're concerned anyway. And that's a hard reality to surrender to and accept. And then there's the grieving. Once the decision to walk away from the tribe permanently is made, we begin the process of grieving the loss of what was, as well as what never was, and what will never be. And what we have to understand is that we're living through a very complex and intense grieving process, as often we grieve the loss of people who are still very much alive and walking around as if all is well. Meanwhile, you're on the floor in a puddle of pure pain and real lasting grief. And they don't care. This is an excruciatingly painful thing. to grieve the loss of people who are still among us, while the more narcissistic family members run a years, if not decades long smear campaign, spreading a highly distorted, if not completely fabricated narrative for no other reason than to cover their own ass and protect their false image and fake phony persona. Moreover, making themselves look like the so-called victim and you, the chosen family scapegoat, the villain, when in reality, the absolute opposite is the truth of the matter. And now I'm not saying that you have to identify as being the victim because you've been scapegoated. What I'm saying is you have to acknowledge that you have been victimized, and probably in no small way. Telling yourself, and where appropriate, others, the truth about that truth telling is a very big and important part of the healing process. And that healing process takes time. And I won't lie, it can feel absolutely soul destroying while we're going through it. When in reality, if we do our work and we do it well, it leads to a reconnecting to your true authentic self and a liberation of your soul that is necessary if you ever want to be able to live your best life as your best self. But tell that to your unhealed, wounded inner child when he or she is fully activated and you're on the floor in a fetal position, grieving what at the time feels like epic losses, while simultaneously surrendering to the reality. Not only do they not love you at all, while you deeply love them, they actually couldn't give a flying bleep about you and your well-being. And therefore, you have to reconcile yourself to the fact that where your family is concerned, you are fundamentally all alone in the world. Painful stuff. Now comment below and tell me whether or not you can relate to any of this. Let me know in the comments section below. And if you do, you're likely an excellent candidate for my 8-week transformational coaching program, the Freedom Class. If that's of interest to you, there's a link in the description below this video where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team. Now, after mustering the courage to say what they need to say, then following through by doing what they need to do in order to break away from their dysfunctional family of origin, there's going to be a lot of work, a lot of healing work that needs to be done in order for the scapegoat to have a shot at finally enjoying the happy, healthy, and secure life that they not only deserve, but have probably been aching for their entire lives. So, as I've already alluded to, narcissistic abusers use scapegoats as dumping grounds for their hostility, frustration, and unresolved negative emotions. So, it's very common for scapegoats to grapple with feelings of inadequacy and low self-worth. After a lifetime of gaslighting, relentless criticism, blaming, and shaming, along with all the other forms of emotional, psychological, and spiritual abuse, naturally, the scapegoat is going to have difficulty seeing themselves clearly, as well as regulating their emotions and coping well with the everyday stresses of life. Nothing creates a dysregulated nervous system like decades of being the family scapegoat in a sick family system. Not surprisingly, it's also common for the family scapegoat to develop substance abuse issues as a means of medicating from the pain they carry, both consciously and subconsciously. The abuse that scapegoats endure not only teaches them that they are unlovable, unworthy, and fundamentally flawed, but it also teaches them to distrust their own thoughts, feelings, and emotions, their intuitive knowing, as well as neglect their own needs, which in turn causes them to have an unhealthy self-concept. And an unhealthy self-concept boils down to a fundamental breakdown in the relationship that we have with ourselves, which then extends to maladaptive ways of relating with others and the world at large. And this, of course, is the crux of untreated codependency, but with the added challenges that go along with untreated adult child syndrome, as well as scapegoat abuse syndrome, all of which fall under the umbrella of the detrimental effects of narcissistic abuse as a result of long-term exposure to a narcissistic family of origin. So, needless to say, scapegoats have a lot of work to do, a lot of work, if they want to learn how to love themselves fully and move on to create a beautiful life for themselves. And as they say, you can't get well in the same environment where you got sick. So it's for this reason that going no contact or having as little contact as possible with their family of origin is really important for the scapegoat to consider as a first step in their healing and recovery. Because after years of invalidation, devaluation, and painful chaos, drama, and trauma, their abuser's condescending voice can be all it takes to gaslight and manipulate them back into the abuse cycle. And all that can take is something as simple as a text, a phone call, or a passive-aggressive comment, dig, or cheap shot. In particular, in the early stages of recovery, when the scapegoat is still highly vulnerable. If the scapegoat is able to find a solid support system that can guide and encourage them when it comes to setting and maintaining firm boundaries with their family after leaving, whether they've gone full-blown no contact or are simply using the gray rock method while having very little contact, either way, they will stand a much better chance of succeeding in helping and healing themselves long term and fundamentally changing the entire trajectory of their lives for the better. Now that said, once the narcissistic abusers realize the game has changed for real and for good, by virtue of the fact that the scapegoat isn't playing anymore, and to whatever degree has decided they're done, it's very common for members of the narcissistic family to try to isolate the scapegoat via a smear campaign. Why? Well, because when toxic people realize they can no longer control you, they'll go to great lengths to control what others think and how they feel about you. And to be clear, a smear campaign is nothing less than a narcissist's active efforts to discredit, devalue, invalidate, and oppress a specific target through toxic gossip, blatant lies, as well as loads of twisting, distorting, and lying by omission. It fundamentally boils down to this: they have to assassinate your character as a preemptive measure. It's vital that they maintain control of the narrative. And a big part of how they ensure their success in this regard is they go out of their way to not only gather the troops, but more importantly, manipulate the perception of said troops. And they go to great lengths to pull anyone who will listen onto their team with their distorted narrative, which of course includes the notion that it's the narcissist who is the victim. And if you identify as the family scapegoat, it is fully your job to do your work and get your self-esteem to a place where it does not matter what they say or who chooses to believe it. Now, I'm not saying this is easy, but you can do it. You cannot control what a disgruntled, lying, empathy-impaired emotional manipulator is going to say, and your goal is to get yourself to a clean, healed, and solid place within yourself, so much so that you're able to rise above it, no matter who chooses to believe the nonsense. You know who you are. You know what you've lived. You know what you've done and have not done, what you've said, have not said. Let that be enough. And if you do your work, you can get there, and I promise you, it's a beautiful place to be. Now, the good news for the scapegoat is the longer you stay away from your destructive family of origin and the more you commit to doing your inner healing and recovery work, the better, more peaceful, joyful, and productive your life will become. The more you do your work, the more your confidence grows. And the more your confidence grows, the more you attract good people and good things into your life. The more you step into your full power and potential, the more you live out your divine mission and purpose on this planet. And I promise you, that is a very beautiful thing. Give yourself the gift. You deserve it. It's time now. And on that note, I'm going to call it a wrap. But before I go, you should know that the Ascension Class is now open for enrollment. Now, this is for you if you're ready and able to invest in yourself, you're ready to shift your identity, master the law of attraction, heal your relationship with money, and put a full stop end to the limiting beliefs and self-sabotaging behaviors that have been holding you back and preventing you from living your best life. If you're ready to reinvent yourself from the inside out, create your dream life by design, and finally become the you were always meant to be, then click on the link in the description below this video to apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team.